Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of dwraysgarage. Today we're going to be looking at part 2 of our Chrome Delete series. Part 3 is potentially in the works, but there is another video there speaking to the side mirrors, which you have yet to complete. Really procrastinated on that one, but we will take it on soon and we will film it. But in case that's something that you're looking for, we'll make sure we put that out there for you. As you can see here, we're starting with the front grille, and you need to remove that access panel in order to get to the Torx bits to release the Tesla emblem, if you're going to mess with that. You may notice that this wasn't the first time I've taken this off because it's painted white, and you'll see later on where Plastidip was the paint of choice to do that. White may not be everyone's cup of tea. Plastidip does come in minimally white, red and black, so you definitely have options there. I just like the contrast. May not be your cup of tea. I think Amanda is still in two minds about that. The techniques displayed here are very similar to what we did previously. It's just that these particular elements of the car, the front grille here in particular, has a tapering effect. So you do need to cut wide enough for the widest out parts, which are towards the middle. And you want to make sure that you can cover both ends and do the wrapping around. On the back side, you do get a little forgiveness because it is such a dark cavity, so you can be a little bit more sloppy back there. But on the front side, you can see here where I didn't use the knifeless tape, which we did on the other side, and you'll see that shortly, and I'll explain why that was a better way to go. So you can see here where I called in the boss for backup. If I'm not mistaken, while you can work it that way, I think she may have aborted on that process and gone down the path that you're about to see here. So sadly, you're going to get to see two versions of two elements today, one being the front grille, two being the side marker, where frankly experience dictated there was a better way to do it. And knifeless tape was the hero in both circumstances. One of the things here where the two sides of the centerpiece meet, it's very tricky to not leave a silver gap. So the knifeless tape really helped cut that line perfectly to avoid an overlap. So there were two parts to the knifeless tape, one running across the front panel here, and then one running down the middle. And then the only thing to remember when you're laying this down is which order did you lay it down? So when you pull it up, you're not trying to rip through the other knifeless tape rope, which will likely tear up your vinyl. A little bit of heat is helpful along the edges and especially around that corner there, just to help the vinyl just stretch a little bit and avoid any crumpling effect. And as you'll see here shortly, the work on this part was particularly good. Again, this is where knifeless tape really becomes the hero, and then all you're left with here is tucking, and then on the left side here, just a little bit of extra magic to do the tucking around the corners, which frankly, I'd love to explain it to you, but you just have to figure out your own technique. And it wouldn't hurt to maybe test with some of your reject or remnant pieces to how you want to wrap around corners of non-car items to kind of get your eye in, so to speak. Heat always finishes the project, releases the adhesive a little bit better. And one thing that I think we mentioned in the first the first video is when you're laying down this knifeless tape here, you want to make sure, it probably looks like we're excessively pushing it down, but that also helps activate the adhesive, warms it up, and make sure it sticks to your line, because as I'm sure you've even had cross your mind here, if that doesn't stick down, this whole thing goes sideways, and you would be dead right. We have not had any issues, but you definitely just want to kind of go the extra mile and make sure that adhesive is warmed up by your fingers there so it just completely sticks where you laid it down. You can see here where I think, if I haven't mentioned it already, you probably ideally want to start with this flat on the front face of the side marker, because I was trying to avoid cutting all across the top and tucked the vinyl in the back there, because there is a healthy gap. But it turns out that in order to get it flush on the front and pure, you're just as well going through the effort of cutting along the top there. And there is enough room to cut with a knife. It's not as precarious as some of the locations. And so Amanda was able to somehow rescue this particular piece, and then I finished it off later. But this is tricky, and so I would advise laying the vinyl on the front first and then pushing it back to the extremities of the piece in order to get it as flat as possible, as easily as possible on the front side. And while this process looks messy, the end result was pretty strong. I think there's a tiny little bubble in the top right there, you may notice, but as I mentioned before, you're not going for probably 6 inches of perfection, you're going for 3 feet at the most. And then obviously anyone looking from further afield is going to think this looks great. Again, this is the most useful I've found my health insurance ID card since I had kids. More than anywhere else on the car, this is where the knifeless tape really came into its own, because there's no chrome showing here across, next to the camera. And that's only because the knifeless tape had a pure line to cut against, because there's really nowhere to hide the vinyl. It literally cannot be tucked. So it's all about absolutely nailing that knifeless tape when you lay it down. So it cuts the perfect line and it cuts it where you want it to. If necessary, favor the darker side of the plastic, don't favor the chrome side, because then you'll have that nasty silver peeking out. So you can see here where I was toying with the rear trim piece. I couldn't find anywhere online that could show me how to do this, so definitely was flying blind, and honestly it's a lot more brute strength than anything else. a little finesse in terms of using a towel and a nice plastic pry tool, but really what's holding it down is 6 tabs across the top, 4 lineup or liner tabs, or alignment tabs even, and then really sticky padded tape on the right and left side of the trim piece. And so once you've managed to get it far enough out, get your fingers behind there and just work it out. You'll see here where I'm pointing out the insert for the Tesla naming, or the Tesla with the word Tesla in there. It's actually a separate piece, and you'll see later on where I reinstall it using a soldering iron, but I uninstalled it using a soldering iron as well. So I took the soldering iron to basically melt the plastic plugs in order to pull that out and paint it, and I plasti dipped that in white as well for contrast. I didn't do a lot of showing how to wrap the trim piece itself. Amanda basically wrapped it like we did every other trim piece, and then had to painstakingly, cut a knife through the middle of each of the letters and then try and lay it down through to the back of the trim piece in order that the vinyl would adhere. And it went very well. It stuck surprisingly well to such a thin piece of plastic. And then I finished off the edges. You can see in the background there the white spray painted Tesla. You don't have to be particularly clever in painting that. You just spray paint that thing 6 or 7 times, let it dry in between coats. And because of the way it pokes through the trim piece, it looks perfect. See, there's no finessing to that paint job. It's one of the nicer ones you do. And then when you lay it back down, I had to readjust the plugs so that the piece would sit back on there, because they were a little bit wide after they cooled off. So I made them more pointy in order to be able to lay the trim piece in there, and then set it in, and then melted the plugs again in order for it to be fully seated. I did have to remove the 2 rubber pieces, so you can see at the top there where the 2 sticky out pieces of plastic, and even now you can see where they're silver. There are rubber gaskets sitting over the pieces that attach into the vehicle, so I pulled those off in order to best be able to get the Tesla word out of the piece and be able to get it in and out. So you'll need to remove those, but they pull off quite easily, and then they reinstall very easily as well. The trick here with obviously using a soldering iron around fresh vinyl on a plastic piece is take your time, mind your fingers, and then just make sure you just take your time and be accurate with it. A little bit of final tucking, and this turned out better than I expected, to be honest, and really like the way this looks. Did not necessarily know what the two-tone would look like, but I think it really sets off well against the car. All right, so we're ready to put this back on. Right here, there are 4 clips at the bottom. 5, I might be out of shot. 5 of these black ones at the top. Is that 5 or 6? That's 6. And then I put some double-sided padded tape on here. And then you can see here, there's just 2 more pieces that we're on. These are gonna need a lot of help. Get some adhesive remover to clean these out. And then we'll try and slot this thing back in. This was a very satisfying part of the project. It had been a long broken up couple of weekends doing this job, and I think, finally seeing it come together, and this piece in particular was one that we were very much flying blind on. Very happy with the result we got there. So, a little quick catch up here since I have low battery, but got a chrome delete going on. I don't know if you can make that out, but that's the Tesla logo. We've just made Model X disappear, and then here's a 75D removed, but still working on the adhesive, which this is making light work of. So between
a new vehicle, a newer adhesive, and that adhesive remover. And then in the box here we have the front logo in white.
So that wraps up another episode of Wray's Garage here, and most of the project for the Tesla Model X D-Chrome exercise. Side mirrors notwithstanding. Like I said, Tesla DIY has a channel. He has a really long video about it with a head cam. Probably be able to check it out there. We will get to it eventually and film it, but I'm going to leave that up to Amanda's timetable. And then above and beyond that, hopefully you can see where the job was. Actually, it got progressively easier as our techniques improved and our patience. And then as long as you have the right materials, right products, you're really going to have no issues with this project. So hopefully this helps you with yours. Please share any footage, videos, pictures you have. We'd love to check those out. And we'll see you shortly on the next video. Thanks for checking, everyone. Be memorable. Be well. Bye-bye.